One day a man came to see me. He was 31 years old. He sat down across from me, remained silent for a while, and then said, "I have a question. I realize it may sound strange, but I really need to know the answer." I nodded and encouraged him to ask. After a brief pause, he said, "Is my penis normal? I mean, do women find it attractive?" At first glance, this question may seem unusual, but over the years of my practice, I have come to understand that it is actually one of the most common male fears. The difference is that most men never say it out loud. They may carry this concern for years, comparing themselves to others, worrying, doubting, and feeling anxious, yet never finding the courage to ask a partner, a doctor, or a specialist. The topic of the size, shape, and appearance of male genitals is surrounded by countless myths. The internet is filled with conflicting information. Some people claim that size determines everything. Others insist that it does not matter at all. As a result, many men find themselves caught between these extremes and no longer know what to believe. That is why today I want to discuss this issue in detail, without shame, without ridicule, and without exaggeration. Only facts, anatomy, psychology, and real-life experience. The first thing to understand is that men and women often view this topic very differently. Men tend to focus on numbers. They are concerned with length, thickness, shape, and visual appearance. Women, on the other hand, usually evaluate not size itself, but the overall experience, emotional connection, comfort, and quality of intimacy. This is a very important distinction. A man may believe that his main task is to meet some ideal standard of size. A woman, however, may not think about it in such detailed terms at all. Her attention is more likely focused on whether she feels desired, whether her partner pays attention to her reactions, understands her needs, and creates an atmosphere of trust. However, let us begin with the numbers, since they are what cause the greatest amount of anxiety. Most men have a highly distorted perception of what is considered average size. Many are convinced that the norm is significantly larger than what scientific data actually shows. As a result, a huge number of perfectly healthy men mistakenly believe that they fall below average. Large scientific studies indicate that average measurements are much more modest than most people assume. When men first learn the real statistics, they are often surprised. Many discover that they are well within the normal range, or even above it, despite having believed otherwise for years. Why does this distorted perception develop? The first reason is the adult entertainment industry. It rarely features average men. Instead, performers with unusual physical characteristics are often selected. This creates the illusion that such dimensions are common, when in reality, they are not. The second reason is related to perception. A person sees their own body from above and at a specific angle. This angle tends to make objects appear smaller. When we observe someone else from the side, our perception changes. The third reason is that most people never compare themselves with actual statistical data. Instead, they rely on rumors, stories from friends, random information from the internet, or their own assumptions. As a result, an inaccurate picture of reality is formed. But the most interesting part begins when we ask women rather than men. If we carefully examine research on women's preferences, it becomes clear that many things men consider critically important are viewed differently by women, or are not considered particularly important at all. When women are asked what affects the quality of their intimate relationships, most do not start talking about centimeters. Instead, they mention attentiveness, confidence, emotional closeness, mutual understanding, and a partner's ability to consider their needs. This does not mean that physical characteristics have no importance whatsoever. They do matter. However, their influence is far smaller than many people assume. Many women report that comfortable experiences and harmony between partners are far more important than trying to meet some abstract physical standard. From an anatomical perspective, there are also some interesting facts. The female body is structured in such a way that the most sensitive areas are not necessarily located at the greatest depth. Many men are surprised when they learn this. They often assume that greater length automatically leads to greater pleasure. However, human physiology is much more complex than that. Sensations depend on many factors: angle, rhythm, arousal, the woman's emotional state, the level of trust between partners, and the unique characteristics of her body. In reality, slight variations in shape are very common. In most cases, they do not interfere with a healthy and satisfying intimate life at all. In fact, certain anatomical characteristics may even provide additional forms of stimulation in specific positions. Therefore, having a non-standard shape does not automatically mean there is a problem. What matters far more is overall health. If a deformity appears suddenly, is accompanied by pain, or continues to worsen over time, then it is important to consult a doctor. However, if it is simply a congenital characteristic that causes no discomfort, it is usually just an individual trait of the body. Now let's talk about something that men often pay enormous attention to, even though women rarely consider it important. The first is appearance in the smallest details. Men may worry about skin color, visible veins, symmetry, and countless other features. However, most women pay very little attention to these details. The second is size in a flaccid state. Many men make the mistake of judging themselves based on how they look without an erection. In reality, this tells us very little about dimensions during arousal. The third is comparing oneself to others. This is one of the most destructive habits. Comparisons almost always lead to anxiety because people focus only on what they perceive as their shortcomings, while ignoring their own strengths. But there is another aspect that is rarely discussed. Insecurity itself can have a much greater impact on the quality of intimate relationships than actual physical characteristics. When a man constantly wonders whether he is good enough, he stops being present in the moment. Instead of enjoying intimacy and paying attention to his partner's responses, he begins evaluating himself from the outside. An inner observer emerges, constantly asking questions such as, "Am I good enough? What is she thinking? Is she disappointed?" This state creates tension and prevents natural connection. Confidence does not mean arrogance or excessive self-assurance. It means accepting yourself and understanding that a man's worth is not defined by a single measurement. Women are often highly sensitive to their partner's emotional state. Confidence, calmness, and attentiveness are frequently far more attractive than meeting some imagined physical ideal. Communication is especially important. Many couples avoid honest conversations about their desires for years. People are afraid of seeming strange, hurting their partner's feelings, or hearing something unpleasant. Yet, it is through conversation that partners truly learn to understand one another. When a man asks a woman about her preferences, takes an interest in her experiences, and is willing to listen without becoming defensive, the quality of the relationship often improves significantly. The same applies to foreplay. Research consistently shows that for a large number of women, emotional and physical arousal before intimacy plays a crucial role. If this stage is ignored, even the most impressive physical attributes cannot compensate for its absence. Conversely, attentiveness, patience, and the ability to create a comfortable atmosphere greatly increase satisfaction for both partners. It is also important to remember that female sexuality is far more diverse than many people assume. There is no single universal formula for pleasure. Different women have different preferences, different physical characteristics, and different ways of experiencing enjoyment. That is why the search for one perfect standard is destined to fail. A much more effective approach is to learn about the specific person beside you. Discover what this particular woman enjoys. Pay attention to her reactions. Ask questions. Listen. Experiment together. This approach is what most often leads to a harmonious, intimate relationship. In conclusion, I would like to emphasize the most important point. Men often evaluate themselves through the lens of physical characteristics and forget how complex human attraction truly is. Attractiveness is made up of many different elements: confidence, care, a sense of humor, emotional maturity, the ability to listen, respect, the ability to create a sense of safety, a genuine interest in one's partner. All of these qualities have a tremendous impact on relationships and intimacy. The man who once came to me with that question had lived with anxiety for a long time. He was convinced that something was wrong with him. But when he received objective information, it became clear that his fears had no serious basis. The saddest part is that millions of men experience similar fears completely unnecessarily. A lack of reliable information causes them to doubt themselves, even though they are actually well within the normal range. So if this question has ever concerned you, remember one simple truth: real